reframe them in your personal relationships, because if everyone is a leader by example, that whether they want it or not, everyone has their own default, inherent responsibility over their life or in influence relationship to others. So I had a conversation with a friend, discussing some of the observations I've made with regards to why I left a particular friend group. And I mentioned that I had a specific friend of mine who was very consistent about what they did, paying their own mind, own attention, but ultimately being a hub for all of us to gather around, even though normally they don't want to be the leader of the group. But by them maintaining stability in their position, let's say, for instance, they maintain their presence in a chat group, or let's say Discord, and they maintain their presence on a nightly basis, waiting for others to join him in his gaming. Now, whether or not any of us pop up, he will always be there. There are times when many of us feel bad that he's just sitting there by himself, just waiting for any one of us to join him in gaming. And I thought about this for a while. Despite them not wanting to be a leader, they do things that could be regarded as a form of leadership. And to describe what I mean by that, every single person has the opportunity to set an example, to be a leader, not because of necessary intention to lead a group of people, but they are ultimately setting an example. So when the notion of leading by example becomes emphasized to people, I would definitely look at what that means on a daily application. Not always about leading an organization, leading a team, leading a business, but what do you do on an everyday basis that sets an example? Whether that's you maintaining stability in a position, you're holding the line, or you going through your daily routine as a standard, whether or not people acknowledge or want to follow it. In that conversation with the friend regarding the other friend who likes to maintain themselves in the Discord channel, I started to realize that leading by example is an everyday thing. When it comes to anything you do is everything you do, leading by example is a continuum. It keeps going no matter what you do and why you do it. So when you have people looking up to you, whether you choose it or not, you are those potential followers' leader. Now, of course, just because we follow someone of influence doesn't mean we'll follow them forever. And some leaders of influence will try to deter anyone from following them because they don't want that leadership or attention. Some will unknowingly enjoy that position as being a hub, maintaining that sense of leadership without declaring the title or the responsibilities for it, which in and of itself is a very strange and yet potentially dangerous position, because that hub, that person who is the leader, the unofficial leader of that pack, asserts a level of influence and to some level disregard for what they exude, for what they express by merely doing what they do on a daily basis. So I would ask for a bit of caution for those who don't realize that there is a set of responsibility by merely existing, by merely them doing what they feel is their independent, self-governing energy. I'm going to go through a few different websites to reinforce my point. Let me switch over to this screen. The first I extract from Mind Tools, which is leading by example. In this situation, or in this paragraph, they mention when you lead by example, you create a picture of what's possible. People can look at you and say, well, if he can do it, I can do it. When you lead by example, you make it easy for others to follow. This particular explanation is in regards to Gandhi leading his revolution of the Indian people from the British Empire, because he was setting example towards how if he can do it, if he lives by example, then other people can do it too. Like one of the humble aspects of Gandhi's life in which other people respected and tried to mimic him was when Gandhi intentionally wore only handcrafted clothing because he didn't want the manufactured products that were provided by the business of the British Empire. From here, from mimicking, from setting example in which others would follow, I want to point out that another aspect of leading by example is reciprocity. A counterexample to this was if someone says something, a leader says something, but they actually don't do it, that lack of follow-through really affects others' view of this person as a leader type, which is why you can't always rely on those who are officially leaders to be leaders. Oftentimes, I find that many individuals, regardless of the title of leadership, become leaders based on what they do above and beyond the norm that is asked, because they're setting themselves to be role models of what would I do if I were in a position of leadership. How would I want to be treated? How would I want my ideal leader to treat me? And that is the leader I wish to become. And so for this part, examples are as much about exchange as influence. That's why lead by examples must ultimately be incorporated as an essential leadership development metric. Serious leadership development doesn't just ask leaders to know how they lead by example. It challenges them to be aware of what leadership examples inspire and influence them. So when we look at those exchanges, how we look at those relationships, this article by Harvard Business Review, when it comes to like it or not, you're always leading by example, this one examines the qualities from a professional angle of what leading by example is, more so than leading by speaking. One of the biggest challenges that I've seen, that I've experienced, and I'll always reflect on this, is when I worked at Caesar Sportsbook, when our own head honcho spoke a lot of academic methodology. But when it came to the application and the influence to cement the application of a particular methodology and how it affects the entire production pipeline of the work, they failed to really create a culture that really accepted it. It's similar to how, to those that know, the Six Sigma practice of product management and execution, that only works when you have the full buy-in of those who can make Six Sigma work. But that's why Six Sigma doesn't always work in a number of production systems. So getting away from Six Sigma, coming to leadership by example, this article really emphasizes the difference, the disconnect between those who call themselves leaders and those who have a reflective, internal, introspective manner in which expose their leadership methodology. To be honest, to be consistent, to be one. Both internal introspection and the exercise of what they support and say. There is some research in the realm of, what is this? Integrative effects of leading by example and follower traits in public goods game, a multi-level study. So I'm glad there is some research on the viability of this approach. Hopefully you don't get epilepsy from me trying to scroll down this large research paper, but after reading through it, there were some tidbits I wanted to point out for this particular video. And it's an important implication is that the cooperation of followers is based on the sensitivity of followers towards how they perceive leading by example, suggesting that different individuals fit best in different leading by example paradigms. Thus, to sustain a high level of group cooperation, this is the key part, to sustain a high level of group cooperation, selecting appropriate group members is equally important to effective leading by example. To examine this idea, more empirical research is necessary. What this means is that you need to have people who also understand, accept, and live by this principle of leading by example. If you have people that don't believe in the leading by example approach, it won't really work. For example, going back to the gaming hub, one of them that I was previously a part of, the others in that group don't understand or recognize the angle of what I'm perceiving. That I see the hub individual as a leader type. Sure, the hub person doesn't want that leadership responsibility, but by them nightly, consistently being the watchman, always waiting for someone to join him, they act as the conduit in which other people will eventually either come to that person out of pity or come to them because they have nothing better to do. So they act as the spoke, the hub in which the rest of the spokes on the wheel attach to, and then that gets the group going. So, but if the other people don't recognize that this is happening, if the other people involved don't recognize that the person is the leader, then there's a potential that that wheel will keep perpetuating because they don't realize they're a part of the wheel. It's very much in the same line of perspective as the allegory of the cave. If people don't realize that they're in a cave, why would they change it? And the reason why I bring up these examples is because I no longer wanted to be a part of this hub because I did not perceive that the other members involved, as much as the hub person, recognized that leadership influence and how it affected the method, the rhythm of the entire group. And when all the members don't openly recognize to one another the challenges of this association, then improvement, refinement, and growth become a very difficult mountain to climb. And given that I've already experienced levels of mockery from versions of this group's interactions with me, in terms of me overthinking and all this other fun stuff, the alienation effect eventually reinforced my departure, because when there are too many things, too many influences and elements that are not aware of each other's cross communication, then it doesn't really reinforce a strong foundation to which you can build on. And whether or not they recognize it is beyond me now. So having people lead by example with a level of introspection and a level of shared appreciation for leading by example is very important to create a growth foundation. Moving on to a Better Up article of leading by example. This describes what can happen when you don't lead by example from a work perspective, whether it's low work ethic. Let me boost this up. Low work ethic, low morale, high turnover rate, inefficient systems, more workplace accidents, lack of trust and respect. Take these points, reframe them in your personal relationships, because if everyone is a leader by example, that whether they want it or not, Everyone has their own default, inherent responsibility over their life or in influence relationship to others. Then all these 7 points or 6 points do have an influence on those interactions, regardless of whether it's a business or leadership of an organization, whether you're a leader or not. So when you are not acting in an honest, according, clear manner with one's own self, low work ethic will mean the motivation to maintain the relationship lowers. The belief, the mood of the relationship also starts to diminish. People staying in your life with a high turnover rate, that means they're not always going to stick around. Inefficient systems in an interpersonal relationship will mean things don't start to make sense. There's going to be inconsistencies where someone will say something, but then they do something completely opposite, and they can't tell the difference because they don't realize what they're doing. They don't realize the continuum, how all things connect for themselves of their own identity, of their inherent responsibilities. Furthermore, workplace accidents, they're going to be prone to making life mistakes, whether in that relationship or outside of the relationship, but it becomes inherent to the individual when they don't realize that they are existentially leading by example. Lack of trust and respect. Altogether, it starts to amount to where you can't really rely and trust or respect the individual because they don't recognize the influence they're exerting. That's why we have a lot of people on social media who will get attention by just being purely reckless, and a number of people find it entertaining. Other people want that level of influence, so they want to mimic that. When we start to curate, when we start to choose the things that we feel need to be amplified, when we need to choose and curate the signal we want to boost, we will be able to start to shift, to grow the type of message that we want to live by. Before I go rambling, that's all I really wanted to emphasize was the realization that everyone lives by example, whether we like it or not. Recognize the pressure that may produce, but at least when we become more honest with ourselves, when we address the things that create the chip on our shoulders, and we not only cope but overcome these challenges that we personally have within ourselves, and we start to live by that growth, that recovery, that humility, the strength in that honesty, challenging and having that stable, balanced relationship with all of our negative sides, our fears, and knowing how to set that example in personal human growth. We start to evolve a better society than those that will hide behind structures and walls and traditions of macho-ness, which hide away the things we truly need to address to live a better life. Something to think about. With that said, thank you for watching, and I will catch you guys later.